Good afternoon. My name is Mark Straley. Today is the 26th of June, 2025. I'm with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation Share Your Story project. We're currently at Bellevue University. They are a sponsor of the NVVMF Memorial Park project, and I'm at the Military Veterans Service Center, part of Bellevue University, with Air Force veteran Jerry Lynch, who's agreed to share his story for the Library of Congress Veteran History Project, the Nebraska Vietnam Veteran Memorial Park Project, and the Bellevue University Oral History Database Project. So let's begin with your full name, if you'd state it.
Officially, Gerald J. Lynch.
Thank you very much.
My mom would call me Jerry if I was in trouble.
Outstanding. Where were you born, Mr. Lynch?
In Bergen County, New Jersey, 1947.
Outstanding. And what can you tell me about your folks? What were their occupations?
My dad was a secretary-treasurer for a salvage company in Newark.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a mom, stay-at-home mom. And I had a brother that was older than I was.
Outstanding. Did you live in town or out in the country?
It was suburbs of basically North Jersey, is one conglomerate of towns after the other.
Can you tell me anything about your neighborhood growing up?
Say that again?
Can you tell me anything about your neighborhood growing up?
It was the old Cape Cod type of houses, an old neighborhood. Certainly had some good memories. We had, back then you can travel several blocks with no worries and just watch the street lights, get home before the street lights came on. But it was a good childhood. Nice.
Where did you go to school?
I went to a Catholic school while I lived in Lodi, New Jersey. We moved there and I was from there to Emerson, New Jersey. And I went to Emerson School and graduated from Emerson High School.
Outstanding. Did you know you wanted to join the service at the time you graduated?
It was in my head. I went to college at Pace College in New York City. I didn't have enough credits for a deferment.
Mm-hmm.
I had already taken my IQ test and pre-testing for the Air Force, and I was accepted, but there was a waiting list. And my draft card notice came up, and I had to go report in Newark. But I really didn't have to do anything since I went through all the process with the Air Force. And then about 60 days later, Air Force called me and said, "We got you, come on down." So that's what we did.
Very nice. What did your folks feel about you going in?
My mom had some mixed feelings about it. My dad was a World War II veteran, and I certainly had support from him. That was very helpful. He gave me some good advice. Don't volunteer for anything. But my mom basically had some mixed feelings on it.
Sure. Well, tell us about how you got to service. You went somewhere and reported, and then shipped you someplace for basic training.
Went to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas for basic training. And when you're in basic training, you have no idea where you're going to end up, obviously. But you do have a dream sheet where you would like to go as far as bases once you get through the training. And being from New Jersey, everybody assumed I want to go to McGuire Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really joined the service to get away and go to maybe Japan. Well, my training instructor came up to me and said, "You got your wish." I figured, I'm going to Japan. "No, you're going to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey." Welcome to reality.
So tell us about basic training and how that was for you.
Basic training, it wasn't difficult. It was challenging to some extent. You're testing your different muscles and running all the time and making accomplishments day by day. And I think it was about 50, 60 days. And once you graduate, you're kind of home, and you're part of the real world with the Air Force. And but it was a good experience. You learned a little bit about yourself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Lots of individual challenges and things.
Yes.
Did you have any specific individual you remember from basic training, an instructor or someone?
The instructor, he was a typical drill instructor, you know. I'm not your mother, I'm here to change your life, and very, very straightforward. And I'll tell you a good story. I was at the KP doing kitchen duty, and I reached in for a glass that I had to wash, and it was cracked. And the glass went up my finger.
Ooh.
It was nasty, and I went to the dispensary, and I got 2 days leave time on base. Well, I came down, and I went to bed into the barracks. Everybody else was out in training. I'm laying in the barracks on my bed, and the drill instructor came in. He had no idea what happened. All I hear is, "Lynch, what are you doing?" And I got up and showed him my finger. He says, "You follow me." I had no idea what was going to happen. Well, he brings me into his private quarters. He said, "You get into my bed, you relax," and closes the door. Absolutely blew my mind. I did not expect that. It was a pleasant experience.
So he wanted you to have quiet time
Yes,
and
yes.
not be on display in front of
Exactly.
anybody else.
Right.
Nice. I like that. Obviously, you recovered. You still have all your fingers.
I do.
So after basic, you went on to advanced training.
Right.
And what
So,
did you do?
McGuire Air Force Base, and you go through training for, I was an air freight specialist, and basically go through that part of the training. And there's a second step. If you qualify, you go into aerial delivery, which is a parachute rigger. And that was another assignment to Fort Lee, Virginia, to go through, get qualified there. And came back to McGuire and basically recovered air parachute drops for qualifying navigators. And we had to go through all that process. That became my primary duty. And the funny part was there was about 60 guys when we reported to the squadron, and they separated us from the rest of the crew. As 12 of us. We're trying to figure out how come they separated us. Well, the 12 of us all had dropped out of college, and that was an indicator that, not knowing I was going to aerial delivery, but at least we had the aptitude to learn and be responsible, and the rest is history.
So tell us a little bit about this advanced rigging training. You learned basic principles about how to prepare a load for throwing out of an aircraft,
Right.
How to standardize those loads to make certain packages fit certain rigging requirements,
It's all
or
based
choose
on
the right
weight,
rigging.
based on the weight of the cargo that you estimate it would be. And it's on pallets. You can do all the rigging and then parachute packing, and you go out. Obviously, when they deploy the chute and deploy the load, you then have to recover the load in the parachute, come back to the base and pack it. I also was qualified to pack manual personnel chutes and reserve chutes. And that was another part of the training.
So it was every aspect
Yes.
of anything having to do with exiting a perfectly good airplane in flight.
Why would you do that? Yes, exactly.
Very good. Very good. And it wasn't just basic stuff, was it? I bet you probably
No.
were getting into some pretty advanced technical.
Pretty advanced, exactly. Not knowing that, a lot of this capabilities, of course, at the stateside, it's for training purposes, but the reality became a reality in Vietnam. I mean, you're really supplying special forces that have a air base, which is out in the middle of nowhere. We are their main supply route to support them.
So speaking of Vietnam, after your time at McGuire, where you got this specialized training, did you do anything else before you went to Vietnam, or did they pack you up and send you along?
Pack you up, send you on.
Tell us about that experience.
Well, my assignment was to Benoit. So you're trying to figure out what's this Benoit base, right? It's just north of Saigon, maybe 40 clicks or something like that. So I report into Thompson. You fly into the main base, and then they bring you up to where you're being assigned to permanently. You'd be Benoit. You're in a deuce and a half going up, and I'm taking all these sites in. You got armored personnel carriers, and this is a war zone. So you're adjusting. I get to Benoit, jump off the deuce and a half, and I hear, "Lynch, is that you?" whoa, this is weird. One of my high school guys that graduated, he was stationed at Benoit, saw me coming off the truck.
Nice.
And I'm going, oh, a friendly face, you know? That was surreal.
Yeah.
Well, I reported to the squadron, you have to report in, and the captain looks at me and goes, we have no room for you here. Now, what does that mean? So you're going back to Tonsanute. Well, I spent 2 days in Benoit, back on a deuce and a half, going back to Tonsanute. Show up at Tonsanute, report in, and they say, well, we don't need you here either. I'm thinking, what is going on? Well, I was there for about 3 weeks, and then they sent me to Cameron Bay, which is on the South China Sea area. Beautiful base. You just can't imagine. You're in a war zone, and Cameron Bay was almost like a resort. It was unbelievable. So I was there for 60 days, and again, working different assignments, loading and also loading the parachutes for drop, and then rotated back to Tonsanute. I report in, and my NCOIC said, you have an interview tomorrow morning. I don't know what it's about. Now, when your NCOIC tells you that, you're figuring, what did I do? Well, he says, you got to see a Sergeant Divot. Oh, okay, who's Sergeant Divot? So next morning I report in, and Sergeant Divot, Chief Master Sergeant, sitting there. He introduces himself. He says, I have a special assignment from the base commander. This is on Tonsanute. He says, we're assembling Air Force. We're assembling riggers to go on special assignments with minimal time notice. I need to select 12 in the whole country. So you go through this intense process of your qualifications, and he's got my personnel file. And he says, stands up, he says, welcome to the Divots Dozen. That's the Divots
Zoom in on
Dozen.
that. Yeah. Divots Dozen.
All right.
Okay.
Well, essentially, he had the ability to teach you things that you never would think would be possible. We created different drops that never didn't exist because aircraft that would come in to do air drops, they were getting shot down. I mean, it was C-130s, 123s. So we come up with called the LEAP system, where you have an extraction chute that drops, and an aircraft is maybe 50 feet off the ground. And the extraction chute comes out, and the load comes out, and it's amazing to see that. And we helped develop that system.
I've seen LAPs done.
You have, okay.
And I'm very, very impressed. So you were in on the ground floor of developing LAPs in a combat theater, which was the only place such a thing could be developed because it's too dangerous.
Now, I do have documents that shows what we did to develop this, and the Air Force Times came in and did a story on us, which I brought with me for you to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, you're in a combat zone and you're doing your job, and this guy is tagging along. He's a reporter. I mean, he's really in our way when you think about it. But not knowing the outcome was going to be a feature story in the Air Force Times. It was fascinating when we got that.
Wow.
It was, and there's another system we developed. It's like a cable system. They put Special Forces would put a cable across the runway, and the C-130 would come in and have a hook, and that with no parachute. It's just a hook that's grabbing the cable and the chute. I mean, not that chute, but the cargo comes flying out of the aircraft.
Wow.
That was interesting. We did it for a while, but it was kind of risky because if you missed the hook, missed the cable, we got a problem.
It sounds like it'd be a lot harder on equipment too. The rollers in the aircraft, the ramp, the equipment coming off itself probably hit the ground pretty hard.
When you're on an aircraft and doing the extraction, it literally sounds like a freight train. It's amazing to be there.
Wow. Wow. And all of the implications for flight as well, because the aircraft is ridiculously close to the ground and the center of gravity is shifting the entire time.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
That's another good story. When the C-130 comes in and you're on it to deploy to go to the bear base, they don't stop. That aircraft comes in, the ramp goes down, you got your gear, you're throwing out your gear, you got your rifle in the back, and you're basically rolling. You come off and do your roll, and then that aircraft is gone. And when it lands, not lands, but it comes in to pick you up, it's the same thing. You're throwing your cargo up, and you're running like hell to grab the ramp to jump, and the loadmaster's pulling you up. But they don't train you for that. You're watching this happen, and you're going, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Right, but they do that to keep the aircraft in a vulnerable situation for the least amount of time. So it does make perfect sense.
I have an interesting story. We're also training the ARVN troops to do airdrops. They speak no English. They speak to the captain, doesn't speak English. Now this is important, plus training them to do personnel shoots. People's lives depend upon this. In trying to explain as best as you can what you have to do with the cords and packing a chute. Well, we had a bunch of ARVN troops we had to pick up at our barrel base to go to with us for training. And it's combat loaded. Now, combat loaded means there's no seats. You have straps going across the back of the aircraft. So they all grab their armor and their stuff and they're throwing it on and they're jumping on and this aircraft is not going to do an assault takeoff, which is like that. Well, we're trying to explain to them who speak no English to hold on to the straps. They're not paying any attention. The ramp goes up, the light goes green, that means that pilot is going up. So he does the assault takeoff. Me and the loadmaster are watching this. 18 troops go flying back at the ramp. Some of these guys got hurt. Bloody noses, but now they know what to do. No barriers with English there.
My goodness. Sounds like quite the adventure. Well, you're telling us about the kinds of operations that you did, and you're telling us about the experiments that you conducted and things like that. Tell me a little bit more about what you did for special operations then as you traveled around the country.
Okay. One in particular, remember I'm in the Air Force, I know nothing about mortar launches but I'm locked in, I'm going in to recover previous drops that we made. And at 1:30 comes in, ramp goes down, you jump off, report into the Special Forces base. And I see the cargo and all the parachutes stacked up already. So they had their troops stacking the stuff up for me. I figured, oh, this is an easy assignment. This is no big deal. So I start walking over to the cargo chutes and the loads, and he stops me. I said, where are you going? I want to check out the loads. He said, no. That may be booby-trapped. We haven't checked it. We haven't cleared it yet. I'm Air Force. I know nothing about what to expect, but you learn quick. So they sent some people over they have the wands and they check them for metal or whatever, and they cleared it. Okay, so we get through that. I figured, easy assignment today. No big deal. I'll spend the night there. So about 2 o'clock in the morning, one of the Vietnamese troops wakes me up. We're getting hit. We're getting attacked. Well, this is Special Forces group, and they're sending mortar rounds out. They need help to take off the charges to get the range how far they have to go. The captain hands me a mortar and says, do you know anything about how you handle a mortar? No, he's the Air Force, not Army.
Right.
And they start laughing as well. We need some help to pull the charges off so we get the range that we need. And I start pulling, this went on for an hour and a half. And they have radio contact, there's troops out in the jungle, the Americans and ARVN troops. And they radio in, stand down, we got it under control. That was one heck of an hour and a half, let me tell you. They go and pull these charges off, and they're taking off like crazy. But it was all for an hour and a half, so we got through that.
And on-the-job training for you.
On-the-job training.
On-the-job training. Yeah, not typical Air Force.
It is. I'm Air Force, not Army.
So tell us about the living conditions while you were doing this, because you moved around quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. I probably went on 10, 12, 15 assignments over a period of the year I was there, all bear bases, all Special Forces bases. And you're basically sleeping on the ground, and then you bring sea rations with you as long as you figure out how long you would need them. And especially during the rainy season, the monsoon season, there's no comfort level whatsoever. If you were lucky, you had a tarp or something to climb under, but you adjust. Now on Tonsanute was fine. We had barracks on the base. It's when I went off TDY that was a little bit of a learning curve.
But you spent most of your tour doing those
Yes.
TDYs.
Right.
So literally you're living a quite Spartan lifestyle.
Correct.
For Air Force.
Right.
I'm teasing.
That's right.
I'm
No,
teasing.
but it's you know, it's when you're doing it, you're doing your job. It never really occurs to you that you've got a learning curve, but you learn quick.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, any particularly funny stories related to living in Vietnam as opposed to doing the work you did?
Oh boy, funny story. The ARVN troops that they did the assault takeoff. That wasn't funny at the time, but you look back at it, you'd have to laugh.
Yeah.
I really can't think of anything other than my buddy I met in high school jumping off with a 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a grueling assignment, and you do have downtime, and you sleep and just try to get some rest, essentially.
Yeah.
Now we would, on these different assignments, we'd be up 3 to 5, 6 days without sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
You just do a power nap. My wife tells me I can do a power nap, just close my eyes and I'm out. She said, "How'd you learn that?" Well, when you're in the military, you learn it real quick.
Right. You do what you have to
Right.
do, and you take it when you can get it,
Exactly.
which may not leave you much time for luxurious, dream-filled sleep.
But when we get to sea rations, you get what you can get, but you got your favorites, so you're always swapping out. You got a fruit cup, I got a spaghetti, we got the meatballs or whatever, that was fun.
Yeah. I have never done C's myself,
Okay.
except one time as an experiment, and I was in Scouts back in the day.
Okay.
Did they have other rations beyond C's while you were in?
No.
Okay.
No. If you were lucky on base day at the mess hall, but sea rations, you get adjusted to it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't bad. I mean, you look back at it, and that was your food, so you're not going to think twice about it.
Right.
Some of the favorites was meat, the franken beans and things like that.
What was the worst one?
Worst one, the pineapples. Oh, they were horrible.
They were bad?
Oh, yeah.
Why were the pineapples bad?
Just very tart, very I couldn't eat them. There's no way.
Okay. Yeah, food's an interesting thing when one is deployed. How about insects? Did you have to deal with insects?
Yeah, a lot of the beetles. And that's a good story.
Mm-hmm.
You've got these beetles that are flying, and they're about that big. And you'd see a Vietnamese grab one, pull the wings off, and pop it in their mouth, and chew on it.
Oh, wow.
The first time you see that, you go, "What? Are you kidding me?" And that's where beetle juice comes from, quite frankly. And it was high in protein. So they would think nothing of grabbing a beetle, pull the wings off, and pop it in their mouth. Hear them crunching. Oh, it was the first time you see it. Like, what was that? Beetle juice.
So the ham and limas were not so bad that you wanted to grab a bug out of the
No, never got to that point.
air. That's
You
a
have
good
all the beetle
story.
juice you want.
That's a good story. Oh my goodness. Well, so while you were doing your tour and you were traveling the country, were there opportunities to contact home, or did you write?
Yeah, you do is take notes and flip something in the mail as best as you can. I mean, it wasn't like a routine you did.
Mm-hmm.
But back then we had cassette tapes.
Mm-hmm.
We would send cassette tapes back home. That was the primary way you did things. And this is again a good story. I was doing a cassette tape to my parents and my girlfriend and sent it in home. I got the cassette running and I'm recording, and we get attacked. You can actually hear the rockets coming in and the waters, and hear the shrapnel hitting the side of the steel on outside. And that was interesting in that my grandsons asked me one time, what was Vietnam like? I said, I'll let you hear the way it was. And I played that cassette back for my grandchildren, and their eyeballs went like that, of course. And they're going, Grandpa, that's not a movie, that's real. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's real. Mm-hmm. I said, but just wait a minute. And things calm down a little bit, you know. And they go, what's going to happen? Just wait. And you hear this woof, woof. Those are our howitzers. They located them, and there's a fact plane flying over. And so we got them, you know. These are kids. Yeah, we got them.
Yeah, good.
Back there we go.
Counter battery fire. Nice. So you've mentioned food, you've mentioned the Beatles, you've mentioned the weather and stuff like that. We're talking a little bit now about incoming and outgoing mail. I guess, how did that affect your day-to-day life? You're concerned about booby-trapped equipment, you're concerned about threats in the environment, you're changing environment constantly because you're moving up and down country. What does that do to a guy in the Air Force while he's trying to figure it all out?
You know, it's a state of mind. You're military, you can probably understand this. You're doing your job. You don't really you really don't focus on it. At least I didn't. Mm-hmm. And the troops that I had working with me, you're a family. That's your family. That's your brother. And if you tend to think about how bad things are, that's bad news. That's not the way you want to process things. Mm-hmm. So it's there. It's in your head. When I went through my evaluation for PTSD, this is what the VA, they ask you trick questions. Did you fear for your life? Okay. You look at the examiner and you say, of course I fear for my life. But while that's happening, you don't really pay attention to that. You're doing your job. You're surviving. I got a good point on that was during the Tet Offensive, started end of January, early February. And there was a C-141 that just flew in to pick up troops that were being air evac out to Japan. And the C-141 pilot, wanted to take off because we were getting hit. I'm standing off to the side looking at all those troops that have to be boarded, and they're not letting them board. Mm-hmm. And then I'm looking up, and here comes the C-124. His lights are out, and everything's dark, and 124 is coming in, and he lands, and he taxis over to the runway, and actually blocks the 141. The captain gets off the aircraft, comes up to us, there's 6 of us from my crew standing there, and says, gentlemen, we have a problem. Well, what's this we have a problem, And he says, I've got Class A explosives on that 124, and we have to find a crew to help offload that. Mm-hmm. Without hesitation, 6 of us went out to that aircraft and physically offloaded crates of Class A explosives. It took us about an hour and a half or so to do that. In the meantime, you got rounds coming in, and you're doing your job. Mm-hmm. Now, the funny part was when I'm going through my examination, she said, well, did you fear for your life? Well, yeah, you look back at it, of course you did, but you're doing your job. What I didn't know is that I have letters of accommodation on that. The captain reported the incident that we helped to do this, and of course after everything was done and the 141 loaded and took off. But the captain of the aircraft wrote us a nice letter acknowledging our efforts, and then the base commander gave us a letter, and that to this day gives me goose.
Would you like to share that with us? Do you have it? Please. I'd like to see that.
Let's see.
And don't worry, just take your time. I will say while you're looking that those kinds of things matter. And you're right, you don't think about it in the moment because the equipment is more important than you are. You got to get those airplanes back out of there safely because we need those to help the effort to keep more people alive. So you just do what must be done. Later on is when you get the nerves.
Yes.
That you go, those were all Class A explosives.
Exactly. Yeah, here it is. Why don't you read it?
Okay. We'll read this out loud just for the good of the order. So we've got outstanding duty performance from Commander 8th Aerial Port Squadron, 2nd of February, 68. I wish to advise that the following named personnel performed outstandingly and beyond the call of duty when they offloaded a C-124 last night. This aircraft was fired upon as it taxied into the ramp and was thereafter in a position exposed to enemy fire. It was carrying a mixed load of engines and Class A explosives. The latter made the offloading process particularly hazardous under these conditions. The names referred to me are as follows: Lieutenant James Winter, Sergeant Ronald Ray, Airman First Class Thomas D. Angelis, Airman First Class Ronald Hammond, Airman First Class Robert Heim, Airman First Class Wayne Lingaitis, Airman First Class Gerald Lynch, and Airman First Class Thomas Mitchell. A few minutes after the aircraft blocked in, I talked personally with some of these men about offloading it. Their response was positive, prompt, and very cooperative. It was a pleasure to work with such outstanding people, and I would like you to express my appreciation to each for the selfless service they performed for Military Airlift Command under these trying circumstances. Ernest Triplett, Colonel, USAF Commander. And the other letter from 8 February, direct to Airman First Class Gerald J. Lynch from 8th Aerial Port Squadron. The attached letter describing your outstanding duty performance on the night of 2 February 1968 is forwarded to you with my personal thanks for a job well done. Your prompt and willing action in the face of imminent danger is ample evidence of your great devotion to duty. Such accomplishments add immeasurably to the squadron's achievements and will inspire others to reach new heights in furtherance of the aerial port mission. My sincere congratulations and best wishes are extended to you now and throughout the remainder of your service in Vietnam. Donald Erickson, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF Commander. So, those are marvelous. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Activities like that make us feel things and become things and do things. Do you feel like stepping up to the plate? Obviously, stepping up to the plate was important, but did doing things like that help shape your life? Did it change you as a human being?
It literally is a life lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't know what your capacity as a human being can do
Mm-hmm.
until that moment happens. And when it happens, it's almost surreal. I mean, there's other examples of that, but you just sit back after it happens and say, what just happened? Mm-hmm. And you kind of laugh it off and have a couple of beers, but it's reality.
Mm-hmm. I get you on that. I believe. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to tell us about your experience in the Air Force in Vietnam?
Yeah, there's something else I'd like to have you read.
Mm-hmm.
That's from Sergeant Divot. And there's a story behind that story.
Okay. We're looking at an Air Force Form 77 Alpha, permanent change of station order, military. And we're looking at the comments from Vernon L. Devitt, Command Sergeant of 2nd Aerial Port Group, NCOIC Aerial Delivery, 14 November 1968. Sergeant Gerald Lynch was one of 12 individuals selected by me from the 3 aerial port squadrons in the Republic of Vietnam to perform duties as required to prepare supplies and equipment for delivery by the Ground Proximity Extraction System, GPES, and the Low Altitude Parachute Extraction System, LAPS. Sergeant Lynch worked directly for me daily for periods of time ranging from 1 week to 2 months. His duties were to assemble airdrop platforms, place supplies and equipment on platforms, lash the supplies and equipment to the platforms with the required amount of restraint to ensure safe delivery. All operations in which this unit was involved were emergency air resupply missions, which required rapid reaction. Almost without exception, the unit was put in place at the operating location the evening prior to the scheduled delivery. The short suspense time necessitated working long hours, sometimes without meals. On one operation, this group of airmen worked extremely hard for 36 hours without sleep to meet a scheduled time over target, and at the end of that 36-hour period, were allowed to sleep only 2 hours before being recalled for duty. On another occasion, this group worked from 16 to 20 hours per day for 21 days without a break. All work was accomplished with minimum supplies and equipment. All items were recovered from the extraction zone and reused as many times as safety would allow. Work areas were anywhere the military installation could provide real estate to operate. On only one occasion, a 2-week period, did this group have shelter from sun and rain. Temperatures were normally in the upper 90s. Despite the extremely hard physical labor, exposure to the adverse elements, lack of material, and the pressure of short suspense times, Sergeant Lynch maintained the highest degree of esprit de corps and morale. The outstanding manner in which Sergeant Lynch accomplished his duties was beyond reproach. He needed only to be briefed on what was to be accomplished, not on how to accomplish it. Many times rigged for delivery by this group were rigged for the first time. Sergeant Lynch's professional knowledge and ingenuity enabled this unit to complete mission after mission with unqualified success. When the occasion arose, Sergeant Lynch supervised the entire operation. Sergeant Lynch's aggressive personal initiative, willingness to accomplish the mission in the shortest period of time possible, outstanding knowledge and ability, and professional attitude qualifies him for promotion to the next higher grade. I unhesitatingly recommend Sergeant Lynch for promotion to the grade of Staff Sergeant for his outstanding performance. 14 November 1968. That's a pretty glowing recommendation right there.
Looking back at all this, Sergeant Divot literally changed my life. He instilled leadership. He was an easy person to talk to, but at the same time was your boss. You followed his orders. But he had confidence in his team. That was the biggest difference. When I mean he changed my life, I really mean that. I was hand-selected out of the whole country, 12 of us. That was significant in of itself. And earlier I mentioned to you about the dream sheet as to what bases he would like to go to. So he approached me, I was about ready to rotate back home. What base would you like to go to? Now, Aero Delivery only has 3 bases in the States. Langley Air Force Base, McGuire, and in California, Travis. Well, I didn't want to go back to McGuire, but Langley was TAC headquarters. And I said I really wouldn't mind going back stateside, but go to Langley. And he says, let me see what I can do. Well, it's the military, anywhere near and out the other. Well, about 3 weeks later, he comes in and he says, you got orders. Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. Wow. Okay, that's only part of the story. So I report in to the squadron when I want to go back to the States. And I report into the captain. And he pulls this out and starts reading it. I'm befuddled, like, where'd that come from? Well, he knew the captain personally. He knew the base commander, Divot, knew him personally. Now, there's different connections if you know how the military works, but he personally got me to Langley Air Force Base. I made staff in under 3 years. That is significant.
Yeah.
Well, I'm on base. I kind of made a creed to myself never to date a dependent. That's a big mistake. Well, a guy in my crew had a date, and he wanted to borrow my car. You're not going to borrow my car. He says, well, what I'll do, and I said to him, what I'll do is get me a date, and we'll do a blind date, and we'll do a double date. It's all right. So we go pick up his girlfriend. She gets in the car, and he's telling me go back to the base. For what? Well, that's where your state is. It's either a WAF or it's a dependent. Either way, you lose, you know. I said, we're going to pick up a girl? He says, yeah, it's her best friend. So I pull up, there's Chief Master Sergeant right here. I go, oh my God. Oh, this is going to hurt. So I meet Linda, you know, we go to, pizza, whatever we did. We had a ball game that day when I was playing softball. Then we washed the car, but we kind of hit it off. I've been married to that girl for 55 years.
So you broke your rule.
Broke my rule.
But somehow the Air Force made it work, and you made it work.
Sergeant Divot was his fault.
Sergeant Divot was his what?
That was his fault.
It was his fault.
He started it, so we go with it.
Nice.
Yeah, that was
nice. You know, it's stories like that make a tour worth it.
Oh, it does.
They change who you are. They grow you. They make you become. So congratulations on that. That's quite the accomplishment.
Well, of course, I met her mom, obviously, when I meet the mother, and she goes, well, eventually you're going to meet my father. Mm-hmm. Well, this is kind of, you know, Chief Master Sergeant, Senior Master Sergeant, and then I had 4 stripes. Anyway, and she says, okay, we'll do this. We'll meet your father. So I knock on the door, and he answers the door.
Uh-huh.
He's looking at me, giving me the
once over,
and he sees my wings. We wear regular wings here. He goes, I see you guys around base. I always wondered what you did. He said, come here, tell me what you did. You blouse your boots. In the Air Force, you don't usually blouse your boots.
Right.
And we had blouse boots. And he says, you sit down, you tell me what you do. That conversation lasted for 3 hours.
Wow.
I swear, and I'm sitting there going, well, I think we're doing good here. I'm not sure, but I think we're doing all right. And we hit it off. It was unbelievable.
Well, good for you.
And our mom says, "What do you want for dinner?" And I go, "Oh, meatloaf, of course."
Yeah.
And that worked out great.
Oh, that's magnificent, though. That is a marvelous story. Well, you've taken us from before basic training all the way through Vietnam service after Vietnam, meeting the girl, then woman of your future and dreams. You met the family and other things. These are all fantastic milestones in a man's career and a man's life. But you've also had a couple of setbacks. We've talked about the Agent Orange and Agent Orange exposure to which you were subject while traveling up and down country. And you've gotten a 100% disability rating.
100%.
And so now, are you experiencing ongoing issues?
Yeah, I've got severe neuropathy of my feet. Severe, I mean, sometimes I can't even feel myself walk.
Mm-hmm.
I got this, again, this is the VA story. I have carpal tunnel from all the rigging we had to do. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of times you're pulling straps, and while you're doing it, you don't realize you're damaging your muscles in your hands. It's
repetitive nature disease. It destroys things.
But with the VA, it's got to be service connected. You go through all that process, and it takes forever to do it. But it's the system.
Mm-hmm.
The people that work there are excellent. Mm-hmm. It's the bureaucracy, if you will. So I ended up having a diagnosis of carpal tunnel and neuropathy in my hands and my fingers from all the repetitive motion. Mm-hmm. Right now, this entire side of my hand is numb, and all these are like tingling feeling. It's an odd feeling.
Mm-hmm. But you are getting treatment.
Yeah.
The government is finally coming around.
Yes, they are.
Doing the presumptive care for the damages that you received, which is important and good.
Absolutely. And as far as the PTSD was concerned, I've seen Dr. Kane here at DAV. He's very, very helpful. Mm-hmm. And a personal physician, psychologist in Omaha. And again, they dig to pull it out of you and talk. When you have PTSD, you've got to talk about it to the professional.
Sure.
And it's very therapeutic and rewarding. And they give you feedback at the same time.
So what would your advice be to veterans who've experienced depressive episodes or PTSD and PTSD related complications?
You've got to get help. It's there. It's never going to go away. My wife, my God, I don't know how she's put up with it, but she has.
But you're working with this all the time.
Yes, all the time. It never goes away.
Sure.
It'd be something would trigger it. Not just walking out the door today. If a UE flies over, I'm back in Vietnam that quick. It's instant. It's those little fireworks, or a large firework go off. Instant. You're there. My wife, if she was here, she would tell you a story on Langley Air Force Base. We're sitting in the back porch, and there was some fireworks that went off 4th of July, and they literally dove under the bed, or dove under the porch. And she's looking at me like, what just happened? Well, you can't explain that.
Yeah.
It's just what happened.
Yeah. Oh, what a experience, and these experiences all massed up and grown together. That's part of what a life is.
It is.
But the damage goes on.
It goes on.
It goes on.
But you learn from it. You overcome a lot of things as best as you can.
Sure.
But you have to get help.
So goodness came out of this experience, as well as some difficulties.
Yeah.
If you were speaking to the next generation and you were recommending to them military service or not military service, what would you recommend?
I think that regardless of your background or where you're from in this entire wonderful country, I think it's important to serve. I really do. You learn a lot about yourself. My God, you're not going to learn in civilian life. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to gain confidence. Things that you just in a civilian life it doesn't exist. It doesn't unless you're a firefighter or something like that. But God bless our military. They B-2 bomber pilots. I mean, my God, what can you say? There's no words for it.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that we find people to serve in these positions and do these things, and they oftentimes go in having no idea what they'll do, and they come out the other side of the crucible, and often there's damage, but there's also better people coming out the other end.
Got another good story for you.
Sure.
They're there. Just a couple of weeks ago, my brother-in-law also served, Vietnam veteran, and we were talking about basic training, amongst the family, and my wife says, how much weight did you lose when you went into basic training? I probably lost 30 pounds, easy. My brother-in-law, who's from Kentucky, said, I gained 25. We start laughing and go, what are you talking about? Well, you're eating 3 square meals a day. We don't do that in Kentucky.
Right.
So, okay, that was fun. I never knew that. That was funny.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that you haven't already told us? Just off the wall, whatever.
Yeah, in my private life, after you get out of service, you're trying to figure out, what the hell am I going to do? And I applied to be a federal rigger, working different clubs that pack parachutes. And I was qualified, showed them my paperwork, my credentials. They wanted to hire me. Now, I'm only 22 years old, not married yet, and they asked me, you have to get personal liability insurance. And I'm going, really? And that costs maybe $10,000 a year? Well, that's not going to happen. A kid 22 years old.
Right.
Let's get real. So that opportunity kind of vaporized. But being a rigger, that's the only thing you would do in civilian life but you have to have insurance to do it, so that didn't happen. And
so you're perfectly qualified to send millions of dollars of equipment out the door, to send human lives out the door.
Out the door.
No problem with the military.
No insurance.
No insurance, no nothing. But you come back to the States, you're 22 years old, you got no power.
No,
no power. Yeah, you've got all the skill and all the training and everything and experience, but you can't be empowered because of the liability. Wow.
That kind of disappointed me, but what are you going to do? Anyway, I ended up finding a position at Coca-Cola, working as an hourly employee, worked my way up to scale, and ran.
So you've been with Coke 32 years?
32 years.
Please, let's do the paid political advertisement area. There you go. All right, good to hook. Coke.
Coke and a smile.
Thank you.
But my dad had a background with the union, with the Teamsters, and they actually had this Coke plant under their chapter, and they were hiring. So okay, let me take a look at it, and they hired me. And I was watching over the period of time the union leadership in the plant was what it should be. You know, they're agreeing to everything what the company tells them to do, and I'm not that type of person. You know, I ask questions. I'll make up my own mind, thank you.
Yeah.
So I ended up running for chief shop steward and was elected. I've only been there maybe 6 months.
Oh, wow.
I was a chief shop steward for 9 years. And the company, I won't go into too much detail, but I pulled a fast one when I was a chief steward as being a negotiator, labor contract negotiations. I pulled a fast one as the vice president of labor relations with the company. But I didn't tell anybody I pulled a fast one. And he recognized that. The union was upset that I did it, but make a long story short, they offered me a position as a supervisor. Mm-hmm. Now, you could be walking off a plank after that happens, all right? They're setting me up or what? But I had enough confidence in the management team at headquarters that, no, this is legit. I was a supervisor for about a year, then got a call from headquarters that the labor relations director wanted to talk to me. He's at headquarters, I'm up in New Jersey. And I'm talking to the guy on the phone, he's gonna be in town, he wants to talk to me. At that time, the HR rep was let go, so they didn't have an HR rep. I have no idea what this man's gonna ask me. So he comes into town, I'm sitting in an office, and we're having this discussion. And it's going on for like 3 hours. And I says, is this a job interview? He says, yeah, yes it is. For what? The HR manager. You could have knocked me over the head. He says, I'll let you know very shortly whether or not you're acceptable or not. Well, about 60 days went by and I didn't hear anything. That's it, you know, you just do what you have to do. And then the day before Thanksgiving, he called the plant, wanted to talk to me. The old story, I'm going to make you an offer that you can't refuse. That's what he said. Basically doubled my salary, took my breath away.
Yeah.
And he says, well, what do you think? And I said, oh, let me talk to my wife. Well, he says, fine, this is my personal number. If you accept, then give me a call. All right. So I go home, talk to my wife, and I'm like taken back, you know, and we talk about it, and obviously I'm going to take the job. So I call him that Sunday, and I said, I'll accept the position. I had a feeling you're going to do that. Oh, by the way, tomorrow morning, you get to Newark Airport, you're going to have tickets waiting for you for some training to go to Florida. He knew I was going to take the job.
Sure he did. Sure he did.
I go to Newark Airport, go to Florida for a few weeks for some training, and I come back. And at the time was a HR plant manager, a plant personnel manager. Then I went through different negotiations and did a pretty good job, I would think. Then he made me an area manager. So I ended up as a regional HR manager for the East Coast. I had 5 plants.
Wow.
And let me tell you, it's almost like in the military. The chain of obstacles you have to do that was another short story, but you go on for hours.
You can.
I'm probably working for him maybe 5 years at the time, and he says, he calls me up, he says, I have a special assignment you may be interested in. This guy had a dry sense of humor, so you're never quite sure where he was going. He'd tell you a joke, you wait for the punchline. Well, he told you the joke and the punchline, you're still sitting there. He says, would you like to be considered for an assignment east of the Mississippi? I'm in New Jersey. I am east of the Mississippi. He says, I know that. He goes, east of the Mississippi. That's about the time, a couple of weeks before, the State Department got approval for Coca-Cola to go to Russia. You have to go through the State Department to get permission.
Right.
He said, there's a position available to start up the Coca-Cola operations in Moscow. Would you be interested? Wow. I got to talk to my wife. And my wife had been there as a class trip with my daughter a couple of years before. She was kind of familiar with Russia, with Moscow. So I had to go for an interview in Atlanta with the Senior Vice President of Human Resources International. This is up there. And the first question he asked me is, were you ever in a combat zone? Wait a minute, I'm going, excuse me? He has my resume, he knows, you know. I says, yeah, I was in Vietnam, I was in a combat zone. That was an odd question. But when I got to Moscow, I knew exactly where he was coming from. You're surviving, essentially.
Right. Moscow rules.
Yeah, you have to have an instinct for what's good and what your ass, basically, excuse my French.
Yeah.
But I was there for 6 months. We got the Coca-Cola operation up and running. And now, when you're there, you can't think like an American. You have to think like a Russian. Now, what the hell does that mean? Well, again, there's no Western references I go through a long story, and of course I got to find that replacement. Now, how am I going to find an HR manager in Russia? It doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, I did hire a company that was starting up, a recruiting company. He was American, and he had a brother that lived in Moscow, so I hired them. I had to hire 3,000 people. So I go through this process. I said to him, your primary job is finding my replacement. I said, that's a mouthful. Said, yes, it is. Well, he gives me, about 2 weeks later, he shows up, gives me a resume. And I'm reading this military guy, captain, active duty, but he's in personnel. Now, the only thing equal to personnel is the military.
Right.
And I'm going through his credentials, and they were buying out the military. The Russians were downsizing. All right, bring him in. The guy shows up in a uniform, stands at attention and salutes me. I said, relax, sit down, want a cup of coffee. This is not the military.
Right.
When you interview somebody, especially the high-profile position, when you interview, you're waiting for that magic moment where they say something and a light goes on. So we're going through the formalities of an interview. And I said, how do you get the respect of your troops that you have to command? He says, I have to earn it. Boom. Light went on. I said, give me a minute. So we have a local attorney. I said, find out whether or not, what an annuity would call, because that would be his retirement. Get an annuity, what he would expect to retire had he been in the military for the next 10 years. And we come up with a number. I come back and I said, if you were to work for us, would you accept an annuity and a good salary? Now, an annuity would come up mature in 10 years, but
sure.
He had no idea what I was talking about, really. Well, he's sitting there and he's ready to get tears in his eyes. And he says, are you going to consider me for this job? I says, yeah. Now, he was earning with the military maybe $8,000 a year American money. I offered him $40,000.
Oh, man.
When Russians are emotional,
yeah.
Let me tell you, you get a bear hug like you just would never imagine. And I got tears in my eyes. You got tears in it. When you start, you're going to be glued to me. You're going to be inseparable. And you ask a lot of questions, take a lot of notes. We went through that for several months. But you never know. You just never know. And I had a good feeling about it. I now rotate back to the States. I had to go to a meeting in Atlanta, and the vice president of U.S. personnel, which I knew, comes up to me and says, I got a surprise for you. My vice president standing next to me and said, what's that about? She says, I don't know. We were with maybe 16 other people, like cocktail party. And he leaves, the VP leaves, comes back, and the guy's name is Ruslan. He was there for a meeting. My God. It was like a reunion, you know? And the VP says, where did you find this guy? So I think it's worked out pretty good. He says, yeah, he's doing a good job.
Good on you.
My God, that's so rewarding to see something out of nowhere actually.
I gotta ask, so 22-year-old kid, just out of the Air Force,
Yeah.
can't get a job because he doesn't have insurance to do the thing that he's trained to do, but he's really good at it. He's also learned leadership skills.
Right.
He's learned motivation skills. He's learned how to read people at the feet of some of the finest leaders he's ever known. Did all that lead into you becoming this? And you never imagined it would have?
Never.
Right?
It was never occurred to me. I mean, it life is, sometimes it takes turns. You just go with it, you know, and you got a gut. This may be the right choice. And knock on wood, it has been.
It's a good thing.
It's been a roller coaster.
So have you shared the stories you've shared with us, with your family? I know you mentioned your grandchildren in the tape,
Yeah.
but other stories have you shared with them as well?
Not particularly, especially some of the stressors with PTSD.
Sure.
You kind of share that privately with really other veterans.
Sure.
But I'm actually prepared to share more of it with the family, because I have other documentations and pictures that they would see that they've never seen.
You know, I think it's marvelous when you work yourself to a position where you can. So I wish you the very best of luck with that. I've seen nothing but good come from that with veterans sharing with their families. It's hard sometimes to talk with people who haven't been there.
Right.
But it's also important to share with them that you maybe over the years have been hiding things from them to protect them.
Right.
And now you need to share them because they've reached a point, and you've reached a point where it is shareable.
It's part of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's part of who you are. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we close?
I feel good about this. There's something rewarding in the process. It really is.
Well,
I'm very sincere.
We're very much looking forward to honoring your interview today by posting it with the Nebraska Vietnam Veteran Memorial Foundation website. We're also looking forward to sending it to the Library of Congress Veteran History Program. And most of all, I think we're looking forward to adding it to the Bellevue University database so that we'll be able to get your story to folks doing research into history. And I think the best history research comes from oral histories generated by veterans like yourself.
Yes.
So once again, I'd like to thank you very much for spending time, effort, and energy with us today.
Thank you.
And thanks for spending an hour and 2 minutes with us.
Really?
Thanks so much.
Wow, that was
Appreciate it.
fast.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.